all of us have an ultimate goal of closing the sale. To close the sale, to get a new client, to generate business, to make commissions. All of us collectively share that common goal, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're watching this, you likely could probably relate to the fact that you probably think about that goal every day. Whether you're a business owner or a salesperson, what am I going to do to get more sales or increase sales or to close this particular prospect that I'm talking to? But what I want to point out is that while that's always the ultimate goal standing in front of us, we also all at any particular time also have an immediate goal in front of us when we're specifically working with or pursuing a prospect, and that is to move the prospect to the next stage of your sales process. So I really don't care what you sell and how complex or how simple it is or how long or how short your sales process is. There are steps that you will take a prospect through. Those steps could take as little as 10 minutes to go through. It could take as much as 2 years. But there are steps. And so your immediate goal is to take that prospect to the next step. One of the problems that we can fall into is that we can focus primarily on the ultimate goal. We're so wrapped up in trying to close the sale and trying to get business that we basically put the pedal to the metal, figuratively speaking, in terms of car terminology, and floor it, and are always just focused on sell, 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 and always be closing. Now, the problem with that, and kind of staying with the car metaphor, and bear with me on this metaphor, I'm not actually a race car fan, and I don't know a lot about the sport. You know, if you think about a car race, that they're going to drive around the track for 100 laps, 500 laps, whatever it is, they do not basically, when the race begins, they don't just floor it and drive the car as fast as it'll go until something gets in their way, and then slow down. And if nothing's in their way, they're driving as fast as they can, and just doing that until they win the race. The reality is that they know how long the race is, and usually there are scheduled pit stops. So you could think of that as a process and checkpoints, and they typically sort of control how fast they control how fast they go and limit their speed according to how long they have to go, and they manage the car and the speed and the fuel and the tires according to their schedule of pit stops. And the sales process should be the same thing. You should know the stages that you need to take a prospect through, and having that clarity will improve your ability to not only finish the race but to win the race. Bringing that metaphor back to the world of sales, I want to really focus on that challenge of basically driving your sales process with the gas on the pedal all the way, which bringing that back to sales would be where you're always, every time you talk to a prospect, you're focused on that ultimate goal of selling. Now, you may be hearing me say that and think, I don't always just try to close the prospect, and I'm not only thinking about closing. But it's that you get so wrapped up in that goal that even subconsciously it impacts what you say and do. And that's aligning with that metaphor of the foot is on the gas and it's all the way down. And I want you to lift that foot up a little bit and find your cruising pace and identify the stages that you need to stop at. So let me give you some examples of how a salesperson might subconsciously or maybe consciously drive full speed focused on the ultimate goal of trying to close a sale when they shouldn't. Let's look at cold calling, for example. A person may cold call and get a prospect on the phone, and the prospect is actually not hanging up on them. And so that salesperson tries to just get as much time and continue talking to that prospect as long as they can. And so we're going to talk here in a minute, but a cold call should only be 2 to 5 minutes. And with the floor to the metal and the pedal to the metal, the salesperson could end up on a call where it's going 10 minutes. And what has happened here is that they've focused on trying to build interest to a level where the prospect might want to purchase. But the cold call isn't a place to sell the product. There's not enough time, and I'll explain that here in a minute. The goal of the cold call should be to move to the next stage of the sales process. So that's an example of a salesperson not really focused on the immediate goal of the sales next stage, and more focused on, let me just get as much as I can out of this cold call and try to drive towards closing the sale, even knowing if they know the close isn't going to happen at that particular time. Now what can happen here is that the call goes on too long, you end up damaging rapport, you end up at the end of that 10 minutes in a very unorganized way. You don't really know where to go next because you've really gone beyond the cold call, and so you just end up with a lack of clarity and a lack of control. And let me give you another example. So you may go to a networking event, and there's all sorts of different potential prospects at a networking event, and you end up in a conversation with someone and they ask a couple good questions, and the next thing you know, you've talked to that person for 20 minutes, and you were talking about your product and your service, and you were trying to pitch this person, and they basically didn't want to stand alone at the networking event, so they acted like they were interested, and you thought you had a prospect, and it ends up going nowhere. And what you ended up missing out on was 20 minutes of meeting other people. So if you understand your sales process should have ended with talking to that person for 5-10 minutes, and maybe you transition that person into your sales process, which might be talking again on another day, then you can move on to meet other prospects. But you ended up wasting time, and it was because of that mindset of, I'm going to try to close. I'm trying to focus on my ultimate goal of closing. Let me give you another example. Whether you're on a prospecting call or talking to someone at a networking event, let's say you're at the very first stage of your sales process, which might be the first time you're speaking with someone, and they give you an objection like, yeah, I'm not really interested. Well, your natural response is to try to overcome that objection, to change that person from I'm not interested to change them to be I'm kind of interested. That's your natural response. And so when they say I'm not interested, you might go, oh, you might start talking about your product and how it's better and whatnot, and you're trying to change their mind. Well, stop to think about what that action and that direction you're trying to do is, what it's aligned with. It's more aligned with your ultimate goal of trying to close the sale. Even knowing if you're not going to try to put a contract in front of that prospect, you're still talking and communicating in a way that is aligned with your ultimate goal. Your immediate goal is to get the prospect to the next stage of your sales process. And if you really focus on that, you're going to end up saying something completely different. Let me give you an example. So they say, I'm not interested. Hey, you know what? I understand, and I don't know why you would be interested because we've only chatted for a couple minutes and you don't even know anything about what we do. Hey, listen, I tell you what, I'm not trying to sign you up. I just wanted to basically kind of establish the line of communication between our company. If I could ask you real quick, who are you guys using for blank, and insert something, what your product does. And so what I just did there was I try to keep the conversation going, because my goal is to move that prospect to the next stage, which might be as simple as having a conversation. The one last example I want to give you of why of how a salesperson can just operate with that mindset of the ultimate goal in mind, and how that can impact you, is that you end up trying to sell to everybody because you're focused on the ultimate goal of closing. So every potential prospect I see, I'm going to try to basically, like I said, you're not sticking a quote or a contract in front of people with a pen, but you're communicating in a way where you're going to try to sell the product. And let me give you an example. So there's a lot of people that will call and schedule appointments with prospects without knowing anything about them, and they'll go out and they'll pitch their product. What that leads to, that's a mindset of trying to close. What that can lead to is a lot of wasted time. When you operate with that mindset of always trying to focus on your ultimate goal, you can end up trying to sell to everybody, and that leads to wasted time and bad meetings and bad conversations and bad rapport.